Hi! This is your friendly guide to help you deal with the struggles of Ambien racism. As we all know, the sleeping aid Ambien has a proven history of causing racist reactions to all sorts of stimuli. But did you know that other sleeping aids can also have disastrous social media side effects? Lunesta has shown a rapid increase of body shaming, while Restoril makes users incredibly ableist. Even the natural sleeping aid of melatonin has shown great increases in hatred towards religious minorities, with some linking the Tsarist pogroms as being fire-started by a massive ingestion of melatonin by the court of Alexander III. So when you're looking for some shut-eye, keep a close eye on your social biases, or else you may be next. Oh, hi. This is Ben Yudishin with UnpopularFront.com with Unpopular Front, the podcast. It's obviously the podcast for the left. Loud! This is going to hopefully be a podcast where I will be able to get other people on it at some point. I think I have a few ideas who I'm going to have on. I'm definitely going to try and record an episode of Chip Guys with Ari pretty soon. Ari is graduating from law school, and they're doing so good, but they're really busy. So that's why we haven't really been able to record too much for a while. So if you happened to start to listen to this feed because of that show, don't worry. It's still coming back. We're going to try and get my wife on it again, too. So it's probably, honestly, it's going to become, for a period of time, probably a bit of a reality TV podcast because we're all deep in our Bachelor Fantasy League. I'm sure someone out there right now is saying, Ben, you can't be a good leftist and watch The Bachelor. And you know what? They're probably right, but it's still kind of fun to watch. So, that's what we've been doing. So that'll probably be the, at least a topic on the next episode. But no Bachelor talk here. This is for serious people only. Probably before this goes up, we're going to have a new article up on Unpopular Front by Sarah Spoja. I realized I didn't ask her how to pronounce her last name. She's Punk Sand Witch on Twitter, which is a really good name. I think it's a solid name. I met her on the Street Fight Facebook group and just had read some of her stuff and said, hey, how about we work together? So it's about the IDF, more Israel talk, more reasons to make sure that certain members of my family don't go to the website. So, that's good. But it's been quite a week in news, specifically sort of in the culture war segment of the political landscape, if that's what you want to call it. Although it's kind of insane that this was the biggest story of the week. Definitely the biggest story of the week was Roseanne Barr's show getting canceled because of her Ambien tweets. It's not what I would have said. Probably, I don't know. It's weird. It's they shouldn't have hired her. So I'm in general of the school that I don't like people getting fired, especially if it's something where it's because of inactions of one person, a ton of other people will lose a job, and that's totally what's happening with that show. Wanda Sykes came out and said she was leaving the show. She was a writer, obviously. She's leaving the show now because it's canceled. Everyone's leaving the show. But so like in general, I don't like people to be fired for like dumb shit they do especially if it's gonna affect anyone else. But like obviously they should have fired her, but they just should never have hired her. Is my general feeling. Like this stuff that she said was obviously terrible. Like duh. I mean, she fucking compared a black woman to a Planet of the Apes. Like that is like the most. That is like that's like a more racist version of a Dennis Miller joke, which is impressive. I mean, I guess he's normally just sort of reactionary and boring, but Roseanne has. I mean, I'm gonna admit something because I'm like a bougie professional class kid. I didn't watch Roseanne. I was there during the time period where my family didn't watch TV. We don't watch TV until The West Wing came out, and then oh my god, we all love TV. So that's the lib stock I come from. But I didn't watch the show, but like you would always I feel like there were all these stories in the 90s about like her going crazy and like all this stuff about like her and Tom Arnold. And then, like she kind of disappeared for a while. And then like her Twitter account apparently has been just like filled with insanity forever. Like literally the same racist joke. Like she just happened to not be on the air. She wasn't on the ABC payroll, at the time, but she literally made the same joke about another like black woman who worked for Obama, like in the same, like it's like the exact same thing. She compared Susan Rice to the Planet of the Apes. So it's good to know that Roseanne's reference bucket is not as deep as I would assume it would be for a supposedly legendary comic. Which, that's fine. I mean, that's not the thing to complain about, really. The thing to complain about is probably the racism, but, but and there were some other folks who I saw kind of making the same point online that, it was an interesting reminder of some dynamics that we're kind of dealing with in the sort of current political media climate, and just the magnitude of the Roseanne story, just how huge it got so quickly and how big of a deal it was and how people were celebrating her firing, which is cool that she got fired. And I'm glad, because she should never have been hired. That it kind of seemed like there was this sort of liberal, like tribalist kind of mob mentality, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But there can be this thing that happens when we all become obsessed about these certain sort of like media personalities, or these kinds of representatives of maybe certain worldviews that we disagree with, but are not actually the holders of power that worldview empowers, Roseanne Barr is not a member of the Trump administration yet. Who knows? She's spewing horrible stuff, and there is a case to be made that, obviously, like, that can influence people and that can make people feel more aware of maybe alternatives of how to channel their racism and make them more likely to say shit like that. And that is decidedly terrible. Like, don't get me wrong. But this Roseanne example is, to me, a really good example of political stories and things that can happen in the news, And these moments where we'll all sort of get together and have like a goal and a target, and then we achieve it, you know? We got her fired. But there was no power being built, you know? There's this book by Jane McAlevey called No Shortcuts. And a thing that she constantly talks about is this idea of like, how is what you're doing building power? You know, how is it giving you an ability to make material impact on people's lives? You know, these these media battles and these sort of proxy wars, these culture wars, which is what a lot of that is. It's sort of a it's especially like what we talk about in the actual culture wars, because there's a distinction between like material, let's say gender politics or material race politics, and like getting rid of the bad person. You know, like there's a big difference, you know? And I feel like getting rid of Roseanne's show is, you know, it's a slap on the wrist, and it maybe makes some people look bad, but I don't really know if that's building power. And in many ways, like, not that we shouldn't get rid of her. Again, she should just never have been hired. If we focus so much on it and we gloat, you're kind of empowering the right in a lot of ways, because you're making the liberals and the left look foolish. You know, look like that there's something like that we think this really matters, you know? Like it's one of those cultural signifier things that I kind of picked up on in an article that I wrote at Unpopular Front about this guy, Gerard Alexander's piece he wrote in the New York Times about, you know, liberals, you're not as smart as you think you are. It's like same old, right wing trolling about identity politics and just like saying you just need to be nicer. It's that like respectability politics shit, but it's even just more bland. It's a bad piece, but in the piece he does note this thing that I think is very true, and it'll kind of lead into the next topic about the liberal current obsession with sort of the power of like late night comedy current affairs shows, right? And how some of the times we sort of view them as the battlefield of politics and of the culture war. But it's not, you know? And I think the swiftness that Roseanne was fired is less an indictment of, I don't know, like certain kinds of, you know, like certain political coalitions that are on the rise or something. Like there's no narrative really to be made out of that. But what there is there's the sense that, like, capital just doesn't want controversy, period. And I'm sure this was part of the plan with Roseanne, you know, like, which shows like they fucking know. They know she's a crazy racist. They know they're giving her that platform. They know that by giving her this platform and like making the big deal about how like her character's a Trump supporter and she's a Trump supporter, like they know what that means. And they know what her brand of Trump supporter is. It's like the crazy QAnon lady, literally. And they didn't really care because they want to get that money. They just don't care, you know, until it becomes an issue of controversy. To them, the existence, you know, to the owners of capital, to the corporations who pay Roseanne and who produce it and hired all those people who now don't have jobs because of this whole thing. I'm sure they'll get jobs, but it doesn't matter. still sucks to go from having a job to not having a job. To them, it's more important to just, again, extract as much value out of this as possible. Regardless, I know irregardless is not actually a word. Regardless of the message that it sends, as long as it's not a controversy on them. You can give the person that power and the platform and this refocused interest by giving them a show on your network. But it's when the controversy becomes directly onto you, onto those who have the money. It's like, oh, right. So like this is a huge struggle that is just like super indicative of the problem with a lot of like center left politics right now. And as long as our sort of the engines of visibility and the engines of political organization and power are structured around like things like media, which requires a lot of money, especially like mainstream media or, anything from, basic cable up. They're gonna do this. They're gonna like bring out someone and get as much value as they can out of them as possible, even if it's someone who's as crazy as this and who has said such horribly racist stuff. She wasn't just racist against black women, she was super racist against Arabs and Palestinians too. Not as big, semi-big. It's another lady comedian story. This time it's a lady comedian who's a liberal. Whoa. So I'm just gonna say it. Samantha Bee called Ivanka Trump a cunt. I'm pretty sure it was bleeped on the show. Maybe I'll try and get a sound bite. But she called her a cunt. What are you gonna do about it? Well, apparently what you're going to do about it is apologize very, very, very quickly. So, Samantha Bee called Ivanka Trump a cunt in a very, very, like, reasonable time to call someone a cunt. Like, Ivanka Trump is not a good person, and it's not just about her as a person, I think we need to not worry as much about that, because what Ivanka Trump is and what Donald Trump is, she's just like a manifestation of her father. And while her father is a big orange ego monster dripping with like KFC fried chicken skins, he himself is like a representative of these certain systems, of capitalism and patriarchy and racism and all these different power structures. So if you call Ivanka Trump a cunt, you know what? You're not calling Ivanka Trump, the person, a cunt. What you're doing is you're highlighting the disgusting opulence of her life and her peers' life, the children of the 1% in America, and the power that they have while they are separating families at the border, while they are killing protesters on the quote-unquote border between Palestine or between Gaza and Israel. So she deserves to be called that. And the fact that Samantha Bee apologized, I think, really shows a similar thing to what was happening with the Roseanne story. What it shows is that these people are, and especially sort of the those who are really going to play ball, like Samantha Bee is, are first and foremost products. These personalities that we see, these people that we feel like we know, it's the construction for the brand, which gives the brand value, which is why we have the show. And that's how they can have the show, and that's how they can make money, so they can keep having the show. And I honestly find it really disappointing. Not that, like, I think Samantha Bee is like some leftist. I don't think she is, and I don't think she acts like she is, which is at least good. You know, there's something way worse about the person who acts like they're the most radical person when they're definitely not. But regardless of that, you know, the presentation of these sort of comedian, newscaster philosophers that we have as our sort of new, they're kind of like the new public intellectuals, for lack of a better term. And so much of that, especially coming out of the comedy world, is about like not apologizing and just being who you really want to be and expressing who you are and not being afraid because of certain things like language. You know, I mean, I'm sure he was, like, I'm pretty much positive he was probably an asshole, but like the whole story with Lenny Bruce and like going to jail, and I mean, he was kind of driven crazy because of all his censorship stuff and probably led to him eventually ODing. But there's been a tradition of this, and I kind of thought that we were actually, especially with women, like women comics were really reaching a point to where that was almost like part of the thing. Like that was part of those were some of the principles of this sort of new comedy movement, you know, that like, I'm going to be dirty and I'm going to say what I think and this is who I am, and, you know, I don't want you to be racist, but I'm still going to talk about my vagina, you know, like, to me, that's cool. That's great, you know? And like, having watched Samantha Bee's show and a lot of these other shows, but particularly hers, actually, she is decidedly, I mean, the show is called Full Frontal. Like, the essence of the show was that it was sort of like, it was brassy, for lack of a better term. It was like ballsy, you know? Ugh, I really hate that. There's got to be a better term for that. So, if you're listening, email at unpopularfrontmedia@gmail.com. I know, it's a weird media. I don't know if, maybe I'll change it. Anyways, that sort of a part of her, like, character, the Samantha Bee that we know and love on the show, I don't know if you love her, but whatever, is, like, she doesn't give a fuck. She'll say what she thinks. I mean, Jesus, how many times I feel like during like peak Ted Cruz time, not peak Ted Cruz, I guess this might have been post. I don't remember when the show started, but I feel like she called Ted Cruz a fucking dick so many ways and so many times. And that's literally what calling Ivanka Trump is. It's just the correct anatomy to her biological sex, you know? And I get it that there is a certain level of people, like the word cunt, especially in America, seems to be the most dangerous word you can use. But I've been saying it all the time in this podcast, and I feel like we're okay. I mean, I think I'm okay. Are you okay? So, like, I just find it very weak, and really, like, why back down? It doesn't really make sense for your audience. It doesn't really make sense for your opponents, who you shouldn't give a fuck what they think, almost making them angry in some ways should almost be the goal, at least part of it. But that's not how it happened, you know? It backed down. She backed down really quickly. And I think it just really, to me, it really highlighted how just like the hard limits that we have to these sort of liberal comedy shows, these liberal comedy news shows. You know, as long as they are dependent on larger corporations and shareholders and certain standards and practices and certain sort of PR concerns, they're never really going to be able to be free and just express themselves. Because this was not even a critique of any structure of power. It was just calling her a bad name. So if you can't even do that, you're definitely not going to be strong enough to stand up to actually maybe bite the hand that feeds you a little bit. And if you don't have that, then I don't really know what else your show is. Like, why would I watch that? Besides enjoyable confirmation bias. And while that makes my head tingle a little bit in that like ASMR way, I don't really know if that's really the forefront of political commentary, you know? And if that's what it is, then like maybe we don't need them. You know, maybe that's why we need more independent media. Because, I mean, for me, I'm going to say Ivanka Trump's a cunt. Patreon.com/unpopularfront. Well, we made it. Another episode. Really hitting those important topics today. Just criticizing women about comedy. Good job, Ben. Good job. If you enjoy the show, recommend it to a friend. That would be fantastic. If you don't enjoy the show, delete it from your phone and throw it in the ocean. I will totally pay you back for it. Asterisks. You can go to unpopularfront.com for more episodes, Chip Guys episodes, writings, have a first guest post, maybe, who knows, maybe regular contributor. I don't know. Follow me on Twitter at Ben Udashin. That's my name, Ben. Then my last name, Udashen. Ben Udashin. From beautiful hellhole Seattle, signing out.